Hello, everybody. Today's lecture is about common sense. In doing the readings for this week, you'll see the author define common sense as views described as normal and so beyond question by the majority. There are also views that seem obvious and natural to us. We looked at fast thinking last week, and I want to review it just a little bit. Fast thinking is basically jumping to conclusions. It happens so quickly sometimes you don't even notice. So for instance, with the Mueller-Lyer illusion, the middle line just looks longer. Your brain has processed information about whether that line is closer to you or farther away. Now, usually fast thinking, which we sometimes call intuition, is a really good thing. It helps us accomplish so much. It's very, very effective. But sometimes fast thinking hampers us. And so your assignment last week was to take some tests at the Project Implicit. I want to say that I'm really proud of all of you for questioning the accuracy and validity of this test, even though it was made by Harvard. I think that's right. For instance, you might just be faster as you go along, as you learn how the test questions work. So that would change things, because what they're trying to measure is not what you think, but how quickly you think it. And what we discovered, some of us, is that we have biases that we didn't expect. So there were some students who are women who want to have a career, but they definitely associate, according to this test, women with family and men with careers. And that's just about how quickly you paired images and ideas, how quick your reaction time was. You can firmly believe that women should have careers, as I do, and still have an implicit bias that men are the ones with careers. I remember one time when I was in graduate school, I was talking to a student who was taking first-year English, and she said, "Oh, I have a professor instead of a graduate student teacher this time." I said, "Oh, great, who is he?" Well, I was studying to be a professor, but somehow I expect professors to be men. And if you look around, they most often are still. These implicit attitudes, these implicit biases are not anybody's fault. They're what your culture repeats to you over and over again through images, through events, through songs, through offhand comments. And so I'm going to show you some examples. Here's a photograph of a major conference that was held by President Truman. And look, there's Winston Churchill next to him. And world decisions are being made. What if it were all women? Would you feel less comfortable about world decisions being made? I can tell you that I would, and I'm a feminist. I wouldn't want to. I don't believe that. But I have an implicit bias. And the reason for that is because you don't see women in these positions of power. This is the Fortune 500 club. There is one woman and no person of color on that board. I remember discovering my implicit biases when I saw a picture very much like this, although it was about U.S. Congress. This is the UK Parliament Labour Party, and it's all the women in the party. Tony Blair was very proud of how many women were in the group. When I first saw the picture like this, I thought, oh, how great. Tony Blair is celebrating the secretaries and the aides. That's a terrible bias. So I don't want to have it. I don't believe that women are less intelligent or capable than men, but I have these implicit biases largely by images that are communicated to me and ideas all the time. Here's a picture that recently caused a stir. You can see the original picture of these tech titans of Italy. This was in 2019, is all men. And the people that took the picture realized that and photoshopped some women in. You can really see this woman totally looks photoshopped in. And they had to actually issue an apology. We meant no harm or had any malicious intent in inserting these pictures of women. Of course they didn't. They realized, oh my God, look, there's no women. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing to realize that. It's hard. It's hard to think about these things. Because of our implicit biases, we forget. The person who organized the meeting forgot to invite women. And these acts are wrong, but they're nothing to be ashamed of. They're part of the way that we're all conditioned by culture. So CommonSense in 1979 pictured Bo Derek as the perfect 10 woman in the movie called 10. But look at the most beautiful woman in the world, Venus, as conceived in 1555. Common sense during the Renaissance was not thin is beautiful. Edmund Burke, in the Reflections on the Revolution in France, which was written in 1790, after the American Revolution, right, after 1776, which he supported, but he didn't support the French Revolution. He wrote this book, and in it he describes how common sense encodes the wisdom of ages. And that's true, especially if you think about parables, like a stitch in time saves 9, which is basically about, if you do something now, you won't have to work harder at it later. If you stitch this rip in your clothing now, it will only take 1 stitch, whereas if you don't stitch it and it rips more, it will take 9 stitches. Taylor Swift makes use of the phrase, "and sticks and stones won't break my bones," in her song, Calm Down. So common sense encodes what we think of as natural. And Edmund Burke, in the Reflections on the Revolution in France, said, it's natural to worship the king and queen. It was a really hard sell at that time because the king and queen were just quite awful. France. But it's not natural. It's not natural for us in the U.S. at all, thanks to the American Revolution. In ancient Greece, as you'll see in Botton's book, it's natural for the Greek people to sacrifice animals and natural to see somebody as virtuous for killing other people. In the U.S., Alexander Hamilton died in a duel. Dueling was natural. It was the way that you defended your honor. Aaron Burr imagined that, or believed that Hamilton had insulted him at a dinner. You had to defend your honor. That was what you did. You had a duel with somebody and killed them if they in any way smeared your name. And that was natural for a long time. Duels were outlawed in the 1600s in Europe and England, but they were practiced way through the mid-19th century. And in the U.S., I'm not sure all the states have outlawed dueling yet. But at any rate, 18 states outlawed it in 1859. And after the Civil War, it just became less practiced. So it was falling out of common sense as seeming natural. Right now, we're in the midst of cancel culture. In the PowerPoint for this presentation, which is in the Google Drive, I've put links to arguments for cancel culture and arguments against cancel culture, as well as other discussions. We really need to take into account all points of view in this class, and all points of view, if they're respectfully given, are welcome. Right now, also, we're focused a lot on microaggressions, usually having to do with race, sometimes with sex or gender. And the most important thing about microaggressions is don't blame people for them. People aren't trying to be rude or impolite or cruel most of the time when they commit microaggressions. So the phrase that I like is call microaggressions in, not out. I had to do this at a meeting the other day, and I said, I'm guilty of lots of microaggressions too. We just need to work on them. So I think this is one of them. It's not blaming a person. That does no good. And when we talk about these difficult issues and think about them, shame really gets in the way. We do not want to shame people or shame ideas at all. We want to work through them. We want to think about them. In the PowerPoint, I have some conservative viewpoints about leftist shaming, and also something about how to cope with shame at school, and this information from the National Museum of African American Culture and History, which is about how to talk about race in productive ways. So in the assignment for this week, I'm asking you to talk about your early experiences of difference as a child. And just be honest. No matter what they were, just be honest about them. Remember that all of the assignments you complete for me are completely confidential. They can't be published in any way. There is oversight at the university. That can't happen. So you can be really honest and let me know. I have to tell you, I don't remember it, but my mother told me that the first time I grew up in a white neighborhood, and the first time I saw a black person, I was about 3. I said, "Mommy, look, that man is chocolate." And he laughed. He was very nice about it. But obviously I'd had good experiences with that color. And also, I just wanted to say a word about last week's assignment, the monkey business videos. Don't judge yourself. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not good at focusing," or "I'm not good at paying attention to my surroundings." The point of this was, and we'll talk more about it next week, that when you're doing a slow thinking problem, you can't do other things. You can only do one slow thinking problem at a time. Now, for those people who did see the gorilla, even though they counted correctly, they just expanded the slow thinking problem. But it's really true that you expanded it so that they were also looking at the surroundings at the same time as they were counting, probably because they knew something was up. But you can't work on a really difficult calculus problem and talk to your girlfriend about breaking up at the same time. You just can't. Those are two slow thinking tasks, and they can't be completed at the same time, no matter how good we think we are at multitasking. So do remember that these units are about the difference between slow thinking and fast thinking, and ways to interrogate your intuitions, which you need. You need good intuitions for survival. But just ways to think slowly about them. That's all we're working on. We're not going to shame anybody or force anybody to adopt any position or point of view. Okay, have a good week.